Okay, I think we should begin since we are running a little bit behind schedule. Good evening, everybody. I'm Anil Deolalikar, the founding dean of the UCR School of Public Policy. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to today's very special event, and we have a very special guest whom I'm going to be introducing shortly. But I just wanted to give you a brief background of what today's event is all about. As you know, the UCR School of Public Policy, which was founded just a few years ago, is pioneering bold solutions to the complex policy challenges that face communities in our region as well as around the world. Our faculty and students, in partnership with communities and policymakers, seek to innovate how we approach complex challenges such as immigration, inequality and poverty, health disparities, educational underachievement, water insecurities, energy insecurities, to just name a few. So in keeping with this mission, our school decided 2 years ago to institute a Policy Innovator Award to an individual that we would bestow upon an individual or institution that demonstrated or had demonstrated leadership and excellence in policy innovation. This innovation can take various forms such as legislation, policy implementation, community and nonprofit activity, and public-private partnerships. So this year, we are very excited to present the Policy Innovator Award to our distinguished guest, Ashley Swearengin. Mayor Swearengin is currently the president and CEO of the Central Valley Community Foundation, which serves the 6 counties of Central California and which has provided over $100 million in funding to over 650 community organizations over the last decade. Prior to joining the foundation, she served as mayor of Fresno from 2009 through 2016. And I believe you may have overlapped as mayor along with our own mayor, Ron Loveridge, who was mayor during part of that time. And when she was serving as mayor of Fresno, she played a leadership role in promoting transit-oriented development and green energy projects, as well as in addressing chronic homelessness and stabilizing the city's financial position. She's also credited with boosting significant private and public investment in the city, working with Republicans and Democrats alike. Before becoming mayor, she led a number of economic development initiatives in the Fresno region, including the Central Valley Business Incubator, Fresno State's Office of Community and Economic Development, and the Regional Jobs Initiative. It is because of these accomplishments that I now ask Mayor Ashley Swearengin to please approach the stage to receive the 2018 Policy Innovator Award from the UCR School of Public Policy. At this time, I would like to ask Mayor Swearengin to please take a seat on stage, where she will now be joined by our illustrious Associate Dean, Karthik Ramakrishnan, for a conversation on innovation in regional policy making. Afterwards, there will be a brief audience Q&A, so please hold your questions until then. And for now, please join me in a round of applause for Mayor Swearengin.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Well, we will get into some of these important policy discussions in a little bit. But first, I want to just start off by welcoming Mayor Swearengin, President and CEO of Swearengin. Illustrious career already, and I'm sure a lot more to come. But first, especially with the kind of student population here, I just wanted to ask you, what got you first interested in public service? Public service is something that at least in some quarters is not something that people think about if they want to make a difference. So what made you think about public service?
Well, let me first just take a quick moment to say thank you so much for this amazing honor. I'm really touched, and this is my first time on the campus of UC Riverside, if you can believe that. So I'm a little overwhelmed, and forgive me while I just kind of collect my thoughts here. But yeah, I'm really, really honored and so inspired by what you're doing here at UCR, what you aspire to do, and the launch of your new center is fantastic. So I really feel like this is the beginning of, we've already hashtagged, in case you don't know, Inland Innovators. So we're asking for people to really give life to that. We think that for sure the future of California is inland California, and it's places like UC Riverside and what you're doing here that are really going to be the nucleuses for positive change. So, so thank you for letting me be here with you. You know, when I think back on the career path I've taken, both the personal and the professional journey, you know, there was never a point where I said, I envision a career in the nonprofit sector, or I envision a career in public service. I'm around a lot of people who are more familiar with that line of work at an earlier age, and so I think it's really cool when people start off kind of knowing that that's the path they want to take. It wasn't my path. And had to really do some soul searching when I was running for mayor in 2008, because of course people want to know, why do you want this job? And so I had to really reflect on what was it that was driving me to take that step of being in elected office after, at that point, being involved in community organizations and nonprofit work for about a decade at that point. And my first step into the community-based organization world, the civic sector, I'll say, was in 1998. I went to work for my first nonprofit, the Central Valley Business Incubator. So it was an economic development, sort of micro-enterprise support, small business development, job creation sort of organization. And up to that point, I had pursued the private sector. I got an undergraduate, graduate degree in business, and was raised by baby boomers and by my grandparents, who are World War II generation, very impactful in my life. And always just had this kind of mantra repeated to me, just like, get a good education. We really valued education in our family. My parents went to college, my grandparents did not. And you know, just very sort of salt of the earth sort of people. And my grandparents were constantly saying, just get an education so you can get a job, just stay in some job, any job will do, just make enough money to keep a roof over your head, provide for your family, and that's your life. And so looking back on it, I think I grew up with this really kind of this intense fear that I would experience economic uncertainty like my grandparents had in going through the Great Depression, and certainly life was tough for my parents when they were growing up. I never experienced similar conditions. However, there were a couple of times in my life, formative times in my life, when my family went through job loss. And I remember coming home from school one day and my dad's car was in the garage. And I was like, wait, why is Dad home? He's supposed to be at work. And I remember walking in and just feeling the heaviness of the room with my dad being there, and he and my mom were obviously distraught, and something had happened at work and he had lost his job. I was probably, the first time that happened, in maybe 7th grade. Now, I want to be clear, I never missed a meal. I never didn't have a roof over my head. I never lacked for material things that I needed to, you know, be successful in school and all that sort of thing. And yet that disruption in my family's life, and it happened on another occasion or two as I finished high school and got into college, just that mild disruption really traumatized me, to the point where it really seared into my heart and into my mind that you know, economic distress is like this traumatic experience. So fast forward years later, my family had moved to Fresno. I ended up getting a scholarship to go to Fresno State. I was like, okay, I'll go here. I mean, I really didn't know. You know, these days you practically have to hire a consultant to get into college, for God's sake. Back then it was just like, okay, I'll go there. So, you know, so I'm going to college. I, you know, graduate from.
Which is a great institution.
It is a great institution, and getting better by the day and the year. And I'm really proud to be an alum and love my university. but got rooted in the community, I think, in large part because I stayed in Fresno to go to college. And I remember just as a young professional, and by the way, I graduated from college in 1994. Unemployment in Fresno that year was 18%. So when we went through this last Great Recession, and I'm feeling for, like, Michael's an intern of ours at the Community Foundation. He's a student down here at UCR from Fresno. This is a rock star, future dynamic leader. But these guys, all of you in this room, when the recession not long ago, and people a little bit older than you, they're graduating from college going, oh my God, unemployment is 15%. I'm like, oh yeah, it was 18% when I graduated. But anyway, so I'm in Fresno, and I'm just learning about this place, and I had only been in Fresno for a few years at that point, and I'm starting to show up at business and civic events, and again, I'm just like trying to find a job and work and feed a family I didn't have yet. And I'm starting to hear, oh yeah, Fresno, unemployment. Well, we're an ag economy. So we just are gonna have double-digit unemployment. That's just the way it is. It's the cross we bear to feed the world. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Chronic double-digit unemployment. And then I got a little more into this as a volunteer in the civic sector, volunteering for different organizations that I thought were doing a good job of trying to make, Fresno a prosperous place. And they had the internet barely back then. And so I'm doing online research, and I'm like, oh my, looking back over year after year, after going back like 30 years, every single year, double-digit unemployment. And I'm thinking to myself, I know a little taste of what economic uncertainty is like, and I'm living in a place where tens of thousands of families every day are experiencing chronic economic distress. Kids are coming home from school, and they've never seen a role model, or they've never seen economic stability in their households. Like, how is this place even functioning? I can barely stand up under the weight of my own very small and modest experience with this issue. So honestly, it was just that connection of like, this isn't right. It cannot be. There are too many people impacted by these circumstances. I know what that's like. Something is wrong here, and we need to change it. So that led me into just really volunteering at a deeper level, and then ultimately going into the nonprofit sector and saying, I just got to do this full time. And at that time, in 1998, some of you weren't born probably, but others of you will recall that it was the go-go 90s, right? It was the proliferation of the internet and information technology and dot-coms, and here we go. And not far from our city in the Bay Area, I swear, if you were 18 years old, knew how to code, and drank Mountain Dew, you were a millionaire. Right. So we were just convinced that we were just a few years, if we just had a little bit more infrastructure, and not, if we just had a few more incubators, maybe we got a few investors or whatever, we could get to that same level and be just this hyper explosive economic center. And of course, now 20 years later, I'm like, oh, we're 20 years in, we got 20 more years to go. So there's a lot more to it than just starting an incubator. But that's a long answer to your question, which is, that's how I got into this line of work.
We're kind of sitting on the edge of our chair, so we're not. So that's fine to have long answers that are engaging. Well, so the next period, I mean, you seem to time these things with economic downturns, because the next time when you ran for office, it was in the context of a pretty severe economic downturn. Yeah. So what was that like when you became mayor and were kind of confronting the kind of economic challenges?
Well, and Mayor Loveridge, God bless Mayor Loveridge, the man, the legend, and I mean that sincerely. I mean, we could swap stories. He'd probably have 10 times the stories given his legacy of service here. So it was incredibly difficult for a lot of places in California, particularly inland California. I'm very concerned about the next CalPERS cliff that so many cities are lurching towards. Thankfully, Fresno has an independent pension system, and so that's the one bright spot on our financial picture that we didn't have to worry about was our pension obligations. But what was it like? So, all right, so after leaving the business incubator, did about 10 years of programmatic sort of policy work and trying to answer this question, like, why is this economy so broken? And it was just really an honest sort of intellectual pursuit of like, you'd find an answer, one part of it, and that would lead you to like 10 other things that needed to be done. So anyway, by the time I got to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm just going to have to be the mayor. I mean, that was kind of the journey was just realizing that on the valley floor in the Central Valley, the city of Fresno, 550,000 people, very large city, a strong mayor form of government. So you hire the city manager, you run the administration, a lot of levers that you can use. And I just calculated that we could get farther down the path in a much shorter period of time than if I continued to be on the sidelines and doing policy work and community development, but never really knowing if the right decisions were being made at this anchor institution. And in the Central Valley, your city hall, healthcare, university, I mean, your anchors, like that's kind of where the heft is. There's not a lot of private sector activity. It's all ag-based. So you've got to really line up those public institutions well to try to get your lift. So that was my calculation for why I thought I should be, just jump in and be mayor. So I often said this to my dear friends in labor who soon grew to hate me so badly because I was always the bearer of bad news, and they were just convinced that I had a bag of money under my desk and that I was gleefully hiding it like the Monopoly man with the, and just like, oh, ha, 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 I'll show you, I'll cut your job, I'll cut your pay, but I've got all this money. So anyway, to this day, have a lot of love and sort of appreciation and admiration for people who really hated me for a very long period of time. Maybe some still do. But anyway, I would always tell them, I didn't run for mayor to manage a budget crisis. I mean, I did. You don't slide like, oh, here comes a recession. Let me get into City Hall, right? No, I was pursuing this agenda of revitalization, and a lot of that for Fresno deals with place-based issues and a sprawling city that's really kind of gutted out its core. Now its core is not just the urban core, is like actually 2/3 of the city is really, really run down and distressed. And so I was aiming at that, and I was like, so I need the tools of the city to go after it. Oh, and by the way, here comes a recession. So at the time, I frankly did not fully appreciate what was going on. The local news was all about what a good job the city had done to prepare for the recession, and God bless them, people actually thought that was the case. They just didn't know any better. They had a cash reserve of $17 million. Now this is a $1 billion organization, so $17 million is not that much money. But what they had not fully analyzed, and what became really dramatic very quickly as revenues plummeted and expenses were skyrocketing, because you remember we had this huge boom, right? So all of these labor contracts, which for a city like Fresno, I mean, 80% or more of our budget is personnel, and 99% of our employees are bargained collectively, and so you're like locked in with these contracts. So contracts got signed during the 2007, 2008, woohoo, right? And they're 3-year contracts, so they're hitting their peak then in 9, 10, 11 as revenues were plummeting. So what got revealed was in our overall treasury pool about $36 million of negative fund balances. So it was the case that there was one account that said general fund reserve $17 million, but what had not been taken into consideration is if you look at the 230 other accounts in that overall treasury pool, the net balance was a negative $36 million. So as that came to light, our $17 million positive, poof, was gone, because we had essentially already spent it. And so anyway, it was just like, it felt like every 6 weeks the floor was just dropping. And I actually think it was probably God's mercy that we didn't know how deep it was going to go, because if we would have despaired. But as it was like about every 3 to 4 months we had to put together a plan to cut about $20 million, anywhere from 14 to 20 million. And we did that for 5 years. So it was 2013 before we finally hit the bottom, and we had our first year where we didn't have to include cuts in our budgets. So that was headline, top of the page, above the fold, back when they had newspapers, and that's what everybody thought. And we were there's a lot of work going into that. What people didn't fully appreciate is that during a downturn, it's always a great time to re-engineer your city, to determine what are you going to be when you come out of this recession, because you don't have the pressure of your development counter exploding with traditional single-family development. So we were actually doing all this stuff, not behind the scenes, because thousands of Fresnans knew about it, but I guess people just didn't really appreciate or understand that we were developing these big agenda items. And so then we started bringing them forward in 13, 14, 15, 16, and we just like killed it on policy reforms that we had also been working on during the recession.
So we're a policy school and we're policy nerds. So let's hear about some of those things that you were planning for, so that when you have that opportunity to lift, that you could.
Okay. So I will tell you, there's a really great book called Grassroots Leaders for the New Economy. Have you heard of that? I don't think it's very widely distributed, or I probably shouldn't say that on film. Everyone's read it. No,
Everyone should read it.
Everyone should read it. And Doug Henton from Collaborative Economics, Kim Wallish, and another one of their consulting partners wrote this book, and they studied cities that make great comebacks. And they looked for the common characteristics and traits in those cities. And I remember reading that in probably the early 2000s, and there was this story of whether it was Austin or some of these other obvious places that have had really great comebacks, but some other lesser known cities as well. I remember them saying, we took the recession, in this case it was the previous recession, we took the recession by the horns, and when no one was looking, like we kind of re-engineered. So I had that in my head, like, oh, like this is our recession. Like the other cities had these great success stories of like, the downturn actually gave us a chance to redo things. So you got to consider this, policy students. I'm going to save you, it took me 3 years as mayor to learn this. So I'm just going to make it really easy for you. You're going to get it in 20 seconds. In California, the way we divide up services, government services, is at the local level, we ask our cities, we charter our cities, or we direct our cities to do two things, only two things. So you go into any big city and there's all these departments and everything seems so confusing, and oh my gosh, it's this labyrinth of services and jurisdiction and authority and people and blah, 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 blah. But every single one of those things comes down to two really fundamental activities that they alone are delivering for the residents of their communities. Number one is public safety. Now that's really visible to all of us. Everybody living in a California city can probably figure out that police and fire in most cases is attached to their city and got lights and cars driving around, so okay, we get that public safety. But the other thing that cities do in California is they regulate the built environment, right? So every sidewalk, every park, every tree, every building, where the building is placed, how tall it is, what form it takes, every toilet that flushes, every sink that turns on when the water comes out, the traffic signals, your street lights, everything about your built environment. I'm not saying the city is the only entity regulating that, because there are other complicating layers of bureaucracy, but fundamentally in California, cities regulate the built environment. So what that means, just to make it really simple, I'm thinking as I'm learning these things in Fresno, I'm like, well, gosh, if our built environment's really a mess, doesn't that mean the city put things in place that allowed that to happen? And shouldn't the city then be the primary vehicle to roll those things back? And so for me, dealing with this high concentration of poverty in Fresno, today we have the second highest concentration of poverty of any other large city in the United States. It used to be the worst in the nation. So I suppose we should celebrate that we're no longer the worst, except no one can tell me, did the first one get worse or did we get better? But anyway, still number two is nothing to be excited about. But the concentration of poverty in Fresno, second worst in the nation, is by definition, it's not saying we have more people living in poverty than, let's say, LA or this place. What it's saying is that the concentration, where people live, we have this huge dividing line. People with discretionary income live above it, and people without discretionary income live below it. And we have the most segregation of income levels of any other large city in the United States besides Brownsville, Texas, I think it is. So to me, that's like, hello, land use policy. How has this happened? So our major policy reforms went after land use policy. And because those are the tools we have at the city level. Not to say that just changing those things, all of a sudden, poof, you have prosperous neighborhoods and neighborhoods of opportunity. But I know for certain, if all of the other things and influences we were trying to bring into these neighborhoods, if we didn't get the fundamental policies right, no matter what they were going to be unsuccessful, because we were quite literally regulating this sort of disparity into the fabric of our city. So it's a long background there, but now you'll appreciate sort of why this list of policy reforms. Number one, and frankly, we were pursuing all of these sequentially because we just had to. We had so much ground to make up in such little amount of time. So we did these in some cases sequentially. So we did a new long-range plan, so our general plan, our comprehensive plan, 2035. For the first time, engaged residents in the development of that plan. Thousands of residents involved, had not had a new plan in, like, I think it was 20 years or something like that. So your land use policy document, your comprehensive plan, is your vision. What do you want to be when you grow up? What's important to you, residents of Fresno? What do you want your parks to look like? It's all aspects of your city, and it's a visionary document. By itself, if you don't change the underlying development regulations, you can't implement your vision document. So then, with a lot of criticism from all status quo interests, who kept saying, well, who cares if you change the vision? Your implementing document is 60 years old and no one can make sense of it. There's one guy in the whole building that understands every page of it, and he goes on vacation 3 times a year. So, when he's out for 6 weeks, like, the whole city comes at a standstill because he's the only guy who can make sense of it. So this was a huge problem, our development code. So we rewrote that, got that adopted, environmentally cleared and adopted. Then we heard from private sector interests, well, who cares if your visionary document is adopted? Who cares if your regulations are changed? All your zoning's out of whack because you've envisioned something that's inconsistent with your old zoning code. So we're like, oh my God, you're right. We better rezone our entire city. So on February 4th of 2016, after at that point 7 years of work and thousands of people providing input and working with hundreds of property owners, we rezoned an entire city, which people who know this kind of work, when I say this, they're like, no, you didn't. I'm like, yeah, we did. Yes, we did. Not one person was there in opposition. This was 2/4/16. I remember the date, and I'll never forget it. But we rezoned hundreds of thousands of parcels in the city of Fresno to actually take every single local step we could take to say, this is our vision, here's the regulating document that can implement it, and now the zoning ordinances are in alignment as well. So we are turnkey when it comes to building according to this vision and these regulations. We adopted by right development through the whole city in every zone district, because in our city, it is still enormously challenging to attract private investment into distressed neighborhoods. And so we're trying to remove every barrier from doing that, and then we're trying to hold the line on development that takes life and growth and dollars outside of those core areas. So that was one major component of our policy changes.
So I have 2 more questions,
Okay.
and then we'll open up.
And you're learning that I
the
don't
audience.
do short well.
Yeah.
You're like, okay,
Well, it's almost
scrap
like
half the questions.
Politicians and professors, like, we're famous
It's
for just
basically
kind
the
of
same,
like,
right? Yes.
No, but this is great, and what you, I'm already thinking about both on the research side, but even for our students, what you said is so valuable, right? In terms of the perspectives, in terms of taking those opportunities, changing the rules of the game to make sure that you're prepared, right, for when the opportunity comes again. So I wanted to ask you about cap and trade and high-speed rail. I mean, they're connected, but especially, as a formerly elected official, as a Republican, and with the contentiousness of this issue, especially in the Central Valley, how did you navigate the politics of that to find these pragmatic solutions on these
High-speed rail, I'll take that one first because that really was the big thing, and then yes, coincidentally, it's cap and trade funded to some extent today. So high-speed rail, well, let me just tell you, by the time the California high-speed rail proposal was well-developed and serious, and the voters had approved the bonds, I think in 2008, was the same year I was on the ballot. So, in fact, Fresno County voters supported high-speed rail, and we kind of like to say that we were the deciding factor. It passed by a very narrow margin, and we actually pulled out, we think, the deciding vote. So whatever, I guess some people would be angry about that in my town. But, all right, so when you're right in the middle of the state and you have experienced 30 or 40 years of an ag economy, which, let me say, we love our food production, there's tremendous opportunity in value-added food production. We're trying to protect as part of why we don't want to sprawl anymore is because when we take out permanent crops, we're replacing them with houses, you never get that ag land back. And we're thinking about our nation's food supply and the importance of having an independent food supply. So ag and food is a treasure for us. And yet we know we need to diversify into other things as well that don't compete or interrupt that food production. And you're just right in the middle of the state, literally, 3 hours from San Francisco, 3 hours from LA, 2 hours from the coast, no easy connections except to get in your car and drive. And you're recognizing that, look, economies work well when people, goods, and information move quickly and as uninhibited as possible. And we have this huge transportation bottleneck. So it wasn't difficult to convince Fresnans to support California high-speed rail. And there was a time back in the early and mid 2000s when this was a broadly supported right, left, labor, business, environmental justice advocates, public health officials. I mean, like everybody was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is our windfall. This is the moment we've been working towards. We're prepared for this opportunity. Hallelujah, let's all support high-speed rail. So I was in that world. I was staffed to these economic development projects that we were all, getting letters of support from, every elected official, right, left, et cetera, and advocating to Sacramento to start the construction in the middle of the project in the valley. Because we knew that you could build a lot more for the money in the flat land that we have in the valley. You could take a couple $2 billion and maybe get 2 or 3 feet of construction in LA, or you could get like 100 miles. So it was like, come on, start it here, start it here. We were all on that page. And then the federal dollars flowed to the project. And the federal dollars flowed through the stimulus program, and that was in, I want to say, 2010. And so you all remember President Obama was elected in 2008. Things got hyper partisan very quickly. And now it became a question of like, well, we like the project, but we don't like the source of the funding for the project. And so it's important that we pull on the strings of this project, which, by the way, is very complicated, very difficult to pull off, tons of legitimate concerns about the project. But what ended up happening was just political interests were like, I know, we'll pull on this thread of politics. It's the Obama train, and made it very, very political. And I was really, frankly, naive to the politics for a long time because I just thought we were all about trying to lift up our city and our region and serving in a nonpartisan office. And I was like, what? Of course we're, what do you mean? So when the announcement was to be made that, in fact, California was receiving these stimulus funds and that the Central Valley was going to be the first leg of this project to be built, this was in November of 2010, right before election, 2 days, I think it was, 3 or 4 days before the election that year. And I got called to go to the train station for the press event to help celebrate, like, yeah, we got $3 billion, it's going to happen. I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that. And the congressman who was there happened to be a Democrat up for re-election in a swing district, and apparently there were a lot of people trying to make sure he didn't get re-elected. I didn't think about that. I'm just like, we've been working for a decade for this. Like, this is great. So I show up, and then within seconds, my phone starts blowing up. What are you doing helping this person get reelected? I'm like, are you kidding? I mean, absentee votes are already, the election's already decided. Like, nobody votes election day anymore. Come on, whatever. So really, I didn't see the politics of it. But that ended up blowing up the project in a very significant way. And again, not to say there aren't a ton of legitimate issues and concerns that have to be worked out with the project, but that was the moment, and that you can trace back that it got hyper political. So how did I navigate that? Apparently not well, but I wouldn't change it because I just don't think you stutter step on stuff like this. I think you have to be, committed to the jurisdiction you serve and all things that are good for that jurisdiction. You have to stand, you have to fight for them, or else it's too, frankly, I'm not that smart. I can't keep track of, if I'm trying to look at things from a political lens, there are people who are far better than I am. For me, it's just a much easier and better posture and more effective to be like, hey, is this good? Is this good for my city? And the answer to that question is, of course it's good for my 45 minutes to Diridon Station in Silicon Valley. I mean, give me a break. This is going to be a huge game changer for the Central Valley. So there's a lot more, but I'll stop with that.
So maybe we can save the cap and trade if someone wants. I'll just plant that seed if someone wants to ask that in the Q&A. Because I want to end with lifting up what you started off talking about is this notion, and I love this hashtag, Inland Innovators, and we're going to use it for the launch for the Center for Social Innovation tomorrow, and we're very excited and proud to be able to launch it here. And it's to change the narrative, right? In fact, it's just to recognize where talent already resides, right? Usually we think of innovation as happening on the coast, from San Diego with Biotech Beach all the way up to the Bay Area with biotech there, high tech, and other innovations going on. And we think of inland regions as areas of poverty, areas of need. But there's important innovation going on. Tech innovation, social innovation, policy innovation. So what do you think it'll take to not only change the narrative, but to boost confidence
Yes.
among investors in the state?
Yeah.
Private investors for
Yes.
for-profit enterprises, foundational investors for nonprofits. How do we change that?
Oh my gosh, I love that question because the answer to that question is in this room. The answer to that question is your new Social Policy Innovation Center. I can tell you from 20 years of experience, the answer is you have to change your minds first in your region. You have to expect that nobody's going to show up and help you, and you have to look around at the resources you already have at your disposal and assume that everything you need is already here. Now, what are you going to do with it? And the point at which you make that commitment as a people, as a campus, as a huge region, a major region of our country that has huge national significance, when you make that decision and you start going down the path of knowing we're changing this place and we're changing it for the better, nobody's going to stop us, probably no one's going to help us. Of course they will. I mean, it's the point at which you flip the switch that then you start creating opportunities for other people to come in and help. I remember, and I'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow, but when I first started in community and economic development in 1998, I was just convinced that we were just one billionaire away. Like just one person who would come along and say, like, oh, what a poor city. Let me help you. Here's a venture capital fund. Here's an endowment. Here's the this. Here's the that. And I couldn't believe that every day would go by that we didn't find that billionaire.
We've had some of those conversations.
Right?
In this region
Okay.
too.
Well,
yeah.
So yes, a lot of similarities. So. Fast forward then in probably about my 6th or 7th year in office, after we already were pushing a big agenda, we started to see some things change. We were starting to see outside investors, public, private, philanthropic, seeing our confidence, our smart, well thought out, well articulated plans. We had to spend the time to get all of that stuff planned out. Then we had to take the little resource we had and demonstrate we were so committed to these plans that we would align our own resources behind them, even though it was maybe a third of what we needed. But we had to be all in with what we had. That is actually what started attracting some additional outside investors. But I realized, I think it was probably in my State of the City speech, maybe my 7th year in office, I finally got it. I was like, oh my God, the biggest problem we have is our mindset. And in Fresno, we are really incredibly talented, gifted, beautiful, cynical as hell people. And so I just had to wrestle that cynicism to the ground and call it out. And I remember saying things like, we are all so convinced that that seeing is believing. And anybody who dares to come along and say, like, look, things need to change here, and I believe things are changing, and they need to change faster. You're called Pollyanna, you're foolish, you're unwise, you obviously don't know the challenges of the community, you're using this as an excuse to sit back on your laurels, stay focused on how terrible everything is. You have to blow that up. So I started telling people, it is not the case that seeing is believing. You have to believe that things need to change and are going to change for you to see a path forward. So actually believing is seeing all of the hard work that you have to do and the path forward. And then finally, I just remember sort of the sucker punch, and I was sort of like talking to the air. It'd be like these big State of the City addresses, and I'm just like shadow boxing what I perceived to be sort of this Fresno mindset that needed to change. And I called out cynicism as being cowardice. Because if you think about it, cynicism is really, it's just a fear of disappointment.
Fear of failure.
It's a fear of failure. It's a fear of looking silly, like, oh my God, I hoped, and it didn't happen, and now everyone's going to think I'm an idiot for hoping. And so I just started putting language on it, like cynicism's for cowards, guys. We're not cowards. In culture today, we so elevate and celebrate the really angry, cynical person who is taking up a posture as if they know it all and they're proving how nothing can work, and that somehow makes them smart and good and better. It's actually the easiest thing in the world to be cynical. It takes far more grit and courage and determination and smarts to say, I've seen through the problems and here's a path forward. That's by far the braver, stronger posture. So the more we put words on that and demonstrate it with actions, the more we started to just break up mindset. And I'll just say it again, I really believe mindset is the thing that has to change to get yourself to the point where you'll attract outside investment. And the funny thing is the point, never mind, I'm not going to say. I was going to say, when you kind of get going in the right direction, you're like, never mind, I don't want the outsiders. I'm going to retract that. I actually do. I want outside investment. But it happens from really that sort of ground up.
Absolutely. Well, Ashley was up in Reading today, and so this notion of inland innovators, I really like this imagery. I mean, I've been thinking about these inland areas as the backbone of California, as the kind of the spine up and down the state. And really, I mean, that's where the future housing growth is, that's where the future population growth, future job growth is. And I think to not just kind of be stuck in this mindset of cynicism or just kind of status quo or just incremental change, but to be bold and to think innovatively. So one of the things I hope, I mean, it started off as a tweet and a hashtag between us, but I think if we can start implementing what inland innovation looks like and to help each other out and build that network up and down the state, I think it could be really powerful. So thank you for coming down here, and we'll open it up to some questions from the audience.
Yeah, sure.
So I teed up okay, there we go. Question in the back there. Oh, actually, you know what? There's a microphone here, if you don't mind, sir. Yeah. And if you could state your name and whatever affiliation you wish to add.
My name is Jim.
Yeah.
There we go. How's that?
Yep.
Good?
Yes, that works now.
All right.
Yeah.
There we go. My name is Jim. I'm from the city of Corona, and you touched on the pension issue. Mm-hmm. And in Fresno, you weren't part of PERS.
Right.
So do you got any advice on how to get through this without every city going bankrupt?
No. I mean, I don't mean to make light of the situation because, I stepped out of a city role, obviously, in early 17, and I'm not even probably fully in touch with the depth of the challenges there. And like I said, thankfully, Fresno has an independent system that it's the one thing that was working well for our finances. It's fully funded, so I thank God for that. I have not had to plumb the depths of that issue like so many other cities are having to do. And so I wouldn't begin to be in a position of saying like, oh, here's the formula. All I can do is just acknowledge, like affirm, like this is a really, really, like the Great Recession was one thing. What's about to hit, I have serious, serious concerns about. So, I wish I could pontificate and like, oh, this is going to be easy or blah, blah. It's not. It's going to be really, really hard. I guess to put, an innovative light on, I mean, it's potentially going to birth some policy and programmatic solutions that maybe we wouldn't have reached for except for the depth of these challenges. I'm not really sure where to advise you. I mean,
it's okay.
Yeah,
no one else
you,
can
right?
either.
No one else can either. And
Yeah.
I think about, every now and then, like I said, I'm sort of liking not having to worry about this, to be honest. Although there are plenty of cities in the valley that are dealing with it, but I'll catch CalPERS News, or I'll kind of get glimpses of this sort of stuff, and I'm just like, oh my God, like this is a really, really big, intense thing. So maybe for starters, we really need to figure out a way to engage the public on this issue, like the general public. I know that stakeholders are up to their eyeballs in it, and probably are as well versed as anybody in the country. Some of our employee groups are so smart on these topics, but I think we're really going to have to rely on the broader public to understand what the options may or may not be and get their input. Because if it's just this kind of inside ball, I mean, it's going to be it's just going to be a throwdown.
Well, one thing I'll add to this is that even though we've known for a long time that we need tax reform, as well as, I mean,
That's
Californians, like people everywhere else,
Yeah.
love to have things without necessarily knowing how much it's costing them
Yep.
and how they're going to pay for it.
That's right.
And I think
That's right.
pension liability is kind of a classic example
Yeah.
in which the costs are
Yep.
hidden and they're like tucked away into the future.
Yep.
And so we come up with taxation policies that are not adequate to pay for the things we've committed to
That's right.
in other places. So
That's right.
But you would think that times of crisis would be times in which we could rethink what tax reform looks like. But this is where I think whatever the rainy day funds, it's only going to solve one kind of problem that we're going to get with
Right.
the stock market downturn.
What's your role, Jim, at the city?
I just retired from the fire department,
Okay.
and I'm
So
running
you're-
for city council.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And I'm trying to figure it out.
Right? God bless you. God
Yeah.
bless you.
Thank you both.
honestly.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let us know, Jim, what you figure out.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming. My name is Dick Haley. I am on the city council. And thank God I am not running against Steiner. Okay, so I'm, you'd mentioned that when you had some serious problems, you had to make cuts of $20 million a year. Did I hear that?
Multiple times, yes.
Multiple times.
Yes.
Can you,
About 120
without
million
being
cumulatively.
very, very specific, but can you give me a broad overview of that?
Sure.
And the other thing is, make a note, what was the name of the book that you had quoted earlier?
Yeah.
Do you get that? Okay, good
Grassroots
enough.
Leaders for a New Economy.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. But I wish you,
Yeah.
and nobody else, just me, I guess you and me,
Right.
huh? The other thing is, I wish you would speak about homelessness,
Sure.
if you could do
Yeah.
that. But specifically first, $20 million a year. How'd
Right.
you do it?
And then let's
Right.
also add housing affordability to that,
Okay.
because that's a major issue in the state, homelessness and housing affordability.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then that'll be our last question.
Okay.
Okay, thank
Well,
you. And
good.
thank you.
And we'll
Thank
end
you.
on those easy ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so okay. First of all, it's all a blur, but I would say there were sort of 3 or 4 major chunks of interventions that we went after for just kind of operating budget to deal with the cash shortage that we had. So obviously, the first year worth of cuts was like, oh, we thought it was so hard. Looking back on it, it was so easy, right? I mean, we had funded positions that were unfilled, so obviously we're going to sweep those savings. Every department head in the city had their contingency fund. It wasn't called contingency, but they had it, right? I mean, it was just kind of there was meat for sure, at least for the first couple of budget rounds, right? I think we, and then of course, any position that was open and unfilled, we allowed attrition. We made sure, we essentially did a hiring freeze. Probably by the second major round of cuts, this is like, well, it was probably year 2, but like budget cut number 3 and 4, because we were doing several a year, is the first time we started impacting personnel. My priority, not popular among every bargaining unit, but my priority was sworn positions. We needed as many sworn positions filled as possible. Well, those are also our most expensive. However, I think a community looks to its city and its general fund for its police and fire. And I'm looking around, it's like nobody else is doing this. We have to cover as many sworn positions as we can. So that meant deep cuts to non-sworn personnel. We got to the point where it was almost unmanageable because obviously police officers need a lot of backup and I remember asking my police chief, which do you want, secretaries or cops? And he's like, cops. I mean, and recognized the huge burden that it was on all of the support systems of the police department. So we went through that. We had some bargaining units give back some dollars. It was always generous, but it never added up to much. It was generous of spirit, let me say that, and just the dollars weren't there because they were typically the bargaining units that were they were non-sworn and they were less expensive, and they're like, please don't cut us, we'll give back, and the dollars just were, thank you, but it was just that much. We had some bargaining groups agree to do deferrals, so that helped us get by. We ended up asking nonprofits to bid to come in and run our community centers. So our commitment was, look, if we can keep the parks open and we'll mow the grass and we'll pay the PG&E for the community center, but we don't have personnel to do programming, are there good quality nonprofits who would actually relish the opportunity to have access to these public facilities and work with our youth? So we did a competitive process and we're like, hey, who will come work for us for free? And we actually got some good partnerships in place and kept all of our parks open during the recession, which was great. Service levels dropped in the parks for sure. I mean, trash was getting picked up less, that sort of thing. And let's see, okay, this was a really big stink. So we ended up privatizing our commercial garbage collection, which generated about $3 million a year. And when you're doing $20 million, like let's say you're sitting down to do a $20 million spending cut plan, and you can come up with something that's greater than $500,000 in value, it's a good idea. You're like, oh, there's a nugget. And that's just kind of how we pieced it together. So by about year 4 of the recession, we privatized our commercial service. And then we went after residential as well. That did not go over well. We ended up in a special election, big arm wrestle over that. Our council supported it. Labor brought forward a petition to block that action, went to the ballot, lost the election, so we still have city trash collection. So that was one thing we tried. It didn't work too well, but that's okay. And honestly, it was just, I mean, it was those sort of nips and tucks and big chunks and retirement incentives and just all of those tools collectively, was how we would just manage. And I think the key for us, when I said earlier we had that $17 million reserve, well, we didn't know that we had all these negative fund balances when we still thought we had the positive general fund reserve sitting there. But that wasn't that much. I mean, 17 million is not going to get you. Our payroll was like $5 or $6 million every 2 weeks. So we knew that was a really tiny pile of money, even though we didn't even have that. So we cut early. And what I saw going on in other parts of the state, other inland cities that, Stockton, San Bernardino, they did have cash reserves. And they kind of got into this sort of, they convinced themselves they could just ride out the recession. So they didn't cut as early. So because we cut early, we started experiencing savings early. And that was, I think, a big strategic advantage for us, as it turns out. So anyway, I've actually got a list of things we did. I could probably scare it up. If you want to give me your email address, I could probably get it to you.
Yeah, I think
that would be helpful.
And your insights might prove timely in the next year or two.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'll just do real quick on chronic homelessness. So we had a very frankly, we didn't have a system, I would say. We had a lot of disparate parts in terms of service providers when I first started in 2009. However, under President Bush and the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, I don't know if you guys remember this whole push to do a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness. But it was a thing, and it was actually a really successful and effective thing. So these regional administrators for USICH were going all over the country, helping local jurisdictions get all the parties to the table and write these 10-year plans. Well, that had happened under my predecessor, Mayor Autry, and they inked the plan. Both the city and the county adopted it. That was a big deal. So when I was running for mayor, people would ask me, like, what are you going to do about homelessness? I'm like, well, first, I'm not starting from scratch. We have this great plan. My job is to implement it. But that was really the beginning of trying to create a system out of all these little disconnected parts. Fast forward, we ended up seeing major innovation in adopting a joint management information system among service providers. So now we have common information, common intake. We have our annual counts. Like, we actually know the size of the problem. We know the size of the system that we have to address it. It's too small, but it is getting results. So today we're 44% down in net reduction in chronic homelessness. We've got about 550 people who are continually showing up in our homeless task force, that sort of thing. So that's about the gap of housing and services shortages that we have. So it's not insurmountable, but it's like we've got about another halfway to go on that. But it's really just bringing coordination to all those players, which the mayor's office, we kind of filled that vacuum. And adopted housing first, which was a big deal for Fresno. Everyone was like, no, people have to get clean first. No, they don't. Just get them housing. And we had a big debate with well-meaning people on different sides of the issue who, some were like, we hate housing first because it's too expensive, and like just allow camping and just do these, like, what we felt like was like really, really, really terrible for the people in the camps. And we're like, no, our standards are higher. They'd be like, yeah, but you can't house everybody, so don't. And I'm like, so we shouldn't house any of them? Is that what you're saying? No, we just really just let them camp. I'm like, we're gonna get people services, and we're gonna get them into housing. So that was a big shift for us, and then resulted in, I think we brought online a couple hundred additional housing units, SRO, permanent supportive housing units during that period of time. So yeah, I guess we're about halfway there. So yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You can come to Corona. We'd love to have you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Is
in fact,
that-
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, we have so much more ground to cover, and I
Yeah.
feel like we've just kind of gotten started. So we'd love to have you back.
Yeah, you bet.
Not just to Riverside, Corona. I think there's a lot that our region could gain from these kind of conversations, from your experience and the
Yep.
kind of energy and spirit you bring to
Be
these
happy to do it.
discussions.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent. So please join me in thanking Ashley Swearengin.
Thank you.